This video is dedicated to Kevin. You would understand the meme if you were watching my live stream. It's still up right now 24/7, so when you're done with this new video, check it out. Isn't it weird that we call it a sleepover? I mean, being dead and sleeping are two different things. This world is a strange one. Halloween is coming up soon, and I know a lot of us are thinking about crashing at a friend's house during this creepy time. But beware, whenever you sleep over away from your safe home, you're just assuming you'll be okay at the house of a person you don't actually know. You're taking a gamble with your life, and many of you don't even realize it. So to prove to you how scary sleeping over at a friend's house can be, enjoy these allegedly true stories of sleepovers gone horribly wrong. Number 1. Scary Sleepover Story. Submitted by JESSIE C. Me, my best friend Ruby, and her big brother Angus were all home alone one night, having a sleepover. Ruby's parents were not home at the time. They were out on a dinner date, so we were home alone until around midnight. We were doing our usual things, like posting Musical.lys, playing music, and watching Vines on computers and our phones, generally just enjoying ourselves. Everything was going great, until we suddenly heard a loud alarm going off. It was like a tornado siren was going off right next to the house, but they didn't live by one. We looked outside, but there were no emergency vehicles out there to be making that sort of noise, so we had no idea where it was coming from. We shut all the blinds and tried to ignore the noise. Then we called Ruby's dad and mom, informing them about the strange and unfamiliar alarm coming from outside. They said it was probably the neighbor's aftermarket car alarm, but why was it blaring in the middle of the night? Sure enough, we went right back to having fun. But about 15 minutes later, Ruby kept saying that she heard twigs snapping and footsteps coming from outside. I didn't really care, as there was a lot of wind from outside, and like her dad said, the neighbors could be out and about trying to fix their car alarm, or maybe she was just trying to scare us. Nevertheless, we tried to calm her down. We began playing some Xbox One together, and time began to flow by quickly. At one point, Angus got up to go to the kitchen to grab a glass of water, but then, not too long afterwards, he came back tiptoeing into the room, no glass of water in his hand, and he looked like he just saw a ghost. Right away, I asked him, "What's wrong?" In a hushed whisper, he said to us, "There's someone turning the front doorknob. They're trying to get in the house." Me and Ruby both froze when we heard this. I walked over behind Angus and I peeked down the hallway to see the front door. And sure enough, the doorknob was turning. And thank God it was locked. It kept turning for about 20 seconds. Whoever was turning it was doing it in a way that they didn't want to be caught or heard. This chilled me to the bone. What if we forgot to lock that door? We called Ruby's mom this time, and luckily she answered right away. We told her that someone was trying to get in the house. She told us that it'd be fine, and that she was on her way, that she'd contact the police. Then she told us to check every door and window to make sure it was all locked. We did as she told us, and we tried to stay calm until the police came. We were terrified, huddling in their bedroom. All three of us could now hear someone walking around the house, slowly, crunching into leaves and twigs, trying their best to conceal their movement, but they were very obvious. They began turning the knob to the back door. Then they started checking every window. I was so horrified. What if they got in? What if they got to a window that was broken and didn't latch properly? They could get in at any second. Instead of calming down, I was too busy being paranoid. I saw that Angus was looking through the window blinds. I think he was trying to get a peek at this burglar. We suddenly heard the footsteps coming this way, and as soon as we did, Angus turned around and tried his best to muffle a scream. "What's wrong, man? What's happening?" we both asked him. Angus could barely breathe out the words. He's carrying a machete." Goosebumps covered my entire body. With a weapon like that, would a simple burglar or thief be carrying a machete? What did this guy have in mind for us? We stayed quiet in that bedroom, pretending that nobody was home. The last thing we wanted was to be spotted by this maniac. A few minutes passed by, and we heard the most horrifying sound I've ever heard in my life. It was a massive slam at the front door, as if he was trying to break it down. Then came another. I knew it. If he really wanted in, he was going to make his own way. Just then, police lights lit up the front yard, and we heard footsteps running away from the house. We were safe. The police actually made it in time. All my fears slowly began to drain. An officer came inside to check on us, and he escorted us out to the police car. Before he could drive us to the station, as some other officers arrived on the scene, I got a good look at the front door, and what I saw chilled me to the bone. The man had been slamming his machete into the door. There were deep gashes in the wood of it, and he nearly got inside. So far from what I've heard, they haven't caught the guy. I don't think they saw him run away when they pulled up. Either that, or the priority to the officer was us kids. Well, all in all, I'm just happy to be alive. Number 2. Chased. Submitted by ORION Gamer. I was at my best friend's farm for a sleepover. His name is Maxwell. We were playing some video games in his room when his mom came in and asked us to go close up the chicken coop. We complained because it was so dark outside. It was a new moon, so it was basically pitch black out. It was sometime around 10 p.m., but we dragged our feet outside anyways. We didn't want to look too much like a couple of wussies. Maxwell and I searched around for the biggest flashlights first, just to be safe, you know. The road to the chicken coop was a long dirt trail, about 50 yards in length. Maxwell took out his phone and began playing some rap music out loud to make us feel a bit more comfortable. Even still, I was on edge. I wasn't used to the rural countryside, especially on a pitch black night. As we got farther and farther from the porch light, the only light we had was from Maxwell's phone and our flashlights. We were about 30 feet away from the chicken coop, and I felt like, when I was walking, I felt like I was getting farther away from Maxwell's music, so I stopped, and I looked over at Maxwell. I was right. He had stopped walking, he wasn't moving anymore. This creeped me out. I called back to him and said, "What's wrong?" He started turning off the music, and he whispered to me in the quiet night, "Dude, turn off your light." Then he pointed into the forest where there were two small reflecting lights right next to each other, like eyes. I didn't know what Maxwell was thinking, but seeing those strange animals' eyes, it frightened me. But I was definitely curious as to what it was. Then the eyes began to slowly move side to side, like the head of a snake. But of course it was too big to be some snake. My brain was working overtime, trying to understand what this animal was. I could tell it was a large creature, at least a bit taller than a panther or a wolf, but it kept its eyes on us. We could tell that it was looking at us, that it knew we were there. Then Maxwell spoke again. There was far more urgency in his voice. "Run," he said. "Run right now." As a chill traveled through my body, I took off as fast as I could back to the house. I heard myself running, but I couldn't hear anything behind me, not that creature, and not Maxwell. Still, I didn't look back. I only stopped when I made it back to the porch, and luckily, behind me, Maxwell was there. He was bent over, trying to catch his breath. He looked back down the dirt trail. I'm not sure what he had seen, but right after he looked down the trail, he began running up the porch steps saying, "Go, inside now!" When we ran inside the house, I looked back. Maxwell had the door shut and locked at record speed. But through the window on the door, I could see eyes, those very same eyes, coming quickly down the dirt road. Even though I never saw the body of the creature, what scared me was how high off the ground the eyes were. They were at least 7.5 feet up. This was no dog. This was no deer. It was moving far too softly to be anything I know, because we never heard it. If we had never seen those eyes, I don't think we'd be here today. Well, not alive anyway. We ran to Maxwell's parents and told them what happened, but they didn't believe us. But they were concerned enough to not let us go back outside. We weren't going anywhere anyway. You couldn't pay us enough to go back out that night. For the rest of that night, we were on guard duty and constantly checking out the windows. Eventually, although we were scared, we did go to sleep. Number 3. That was not her brother. Submitted by Crystal W. When I was younger, having sleepovers was a normal thing for me and my best friend. She lived in an old rundown house right next to mine. And one night, during one such sleepover, after a night of fun, we just crashed. Now, she did share a room with her mother with 2 beds, and at the time she slept with her mom and I got her bed. Every night they locked the door to make things safer, and never once did they unlock it at night. At almost sunrise, I woke up and began to look around the room. Everything looked normal, and they were still sleeping. So I decided I'd catch more Z's, and I began to close my eyes once again. But I suddenly was filled with this feeling, and I opened them once more. The door was open, the door that was supposed to be locked all night. In the doorway, partially lit by the light in the hallway, was what looked like a 99-cent store ripoff of her older brother. He looked angry. He looked like he was full of hatred. His normal dark skin was an odd pale green color, and his eyes were bloodshot. He looked me up and down without ever moving his body. When we finally made eye contact, I froze. I noticed that he wasn't wearing any clothes, other than a towel wrapped around his lower half. But he wasn't wet, so he hadn't been in the shower. He just stood there, staring at me. I tried to lay my head back down on the pillow, but I couldn't. I was too scared to move, too scared to pull my eyes away from this brother. Finally, I broke the thing's gaze, and I shut my eyes and rolled over. I waited for the door to close, for footsteps to go down the hallway, signaling that he was gone. But they never did, meaning he was still there. The entire time I laid there, waiting for them to wake up, that boy stared at me. In the morning, I gathered up my courage and confronted her brother about what he was doing last night. Then he replied, "What are you talking about? I wasn't even here yesterday. I work nights, remember?" I never mentioned this to anyone until recently, but I hope that I never see that thing who pretended to be her brother ever again. Number 4. Sketchy Undercover Policeman. Submitted by Jacob. One night, my friend invited me over to a sleepover with another one of their friends. There were 3 of us all together. Me, the host of our sleepover, Nico, and our friend Mateo. We were all around 13 at the time, and Nico wanted to go see a movie that night. We ended up going to see the first John Wick movie at midnight. The movie ended roughly around 2:30 in the morning, and we got back to his house at 3. We were bored and had a lot of adrenaline still going from the movie. So we decided to go longboarding up and down the street that Nico lived on. Once we did that 2 or 3 times, we finally decided to go in and probably watch another movie. We were planning to stay up all night. As we were about 15 seconds away from the driveway of Nico's house, Mateo stopped us and then said, "Guys, look, a car. I think we should pick up the pace. Nobody usually drives around at this time. I don't trust it." We began jogging back to his house. This car was solid black, with tinted windows and blue headlights. The headlights were off until we began running, which was even more suspicious and creepy. No sirens went off, and the guy was going at least 60 kilometers on a 10-kilometer-an-hour block. We didn't know who it was or why they started speeding toward us like that, as if he was going to run us over. But me being the bigger guy of the group, I was the last person to get up the driveway, and I wasn't sure I was going to make it. I saw Nico and Mateo struggling to open the door. I thought to myself, the door's freaking locked. We're trapped out here. But it was the middle of February, and it was cold, so I also thought it could have been just frozen shut. I was now at the middle of the driveway when 2 men dressed like homeless people stepped out of that car. I turned and saw one of them put their hand in their coat, reaching for what I expected to be a gun. I didn't see what he pulled out, but when I got to the door, I slammed it as hard as I could, causing it to burst open, and we closed it right away. We locked it as fast as we could, then ran upstairs to Nico's mom's room. All of us were bawling our eyes out, just thinking we could have just died. Nico's mom went downstairs as the 2 men were still trying to get inside. She opened the door, and the 2 men screamed at her, saying, "3 kids just broke into your house." Nico's mom then responded with, "No, it's my son and some friends having a sleepover. What the hell are you doing?" She and the guys just stood there talking it out. When the men finally left, Mateo, being the smarter one of us, and whose dad was a cop, said, "Hey, wait up." The men stopped, and Mateo caught up to them. Then he asked, "So what's your name and badge number?" They looked at each other, paused, and said, "That's none of your business, kid. Go back home." Mateo persisted, saying, "Show me, now." Finally, they both did. He took down their numbers on his phone and sent them to his dad. Well, after that, we went on with our night and actually did end up having more fun, which is great. But later on that week, Mateo's dad actually got back to us on those badge numbers, and that's when I got really scared. Scared of what could have happened that night. Because Mateo's dad said that those numbers were fake badge numbers. Number 5. The Man at the Door. Submitted by TICCITORY. It was 5 p.m., and I was getting ready to have a sleepover with a few friends. The sleepover would begin at 5:30, and I was getting some snacks, games, and movies ready. And finally, it was time for the sleepover. The first 2 girls to arrive were Lizeth and Haley. They both had their bags and some games with them. I asked them to go put them on the table with the rest of the stuff, all the while thinking this is going to be so much fun. The girls went in and headed to the kitchen, placing their stuff in the right places. I told them to feel free to have some snacks or 2. Not too long after that, everyone else showed up. We all gathered around the living room, and I asked, "Okay girls, what do you want to do first?" And apparently, the majority wanted to play a game of truth or dare. Ah, typical, I thought. So we began our game of truth or dare. Then after that we moved on to a singing contest, and we were having a great time. Now at the time my parents were out, so it was just us girls. As we got settled in and a bit tired, we started watching some movies. We got through the first one and I put another one in, and by then it was 8:30. Elizabeth was sitting by the window, glancing out of it occasionally, and at one point, she looked in the window, then looked back at the group with a painful expression on her face. Guys, there's someone standing outside. We all got up to go look at the window with her, and we saw someone standing on the other side of the road, facing towards our house. It was really freaky. Did we lock the door? I asked, and all the girls said no. So we rushed from room to room, locking the doors and windows. Then we went back to the living room and gathered round. Elizabeth was keeping watch on the man outside. He's still there. One of the girls, Haley, said. I'm scared, guys, and everyone else agreed. After 20 minutes or so, Elizabeth gave the all clear, saying that the man had walked away. We thought everything was over, that we were just paranoid about some stranger standing on the road, when we suddenly hear a knock at the door. It startles everyone. We basically jumped in unison. We gathered around the door and we tried to peek outside, but we couldn't see anything from our positions. So we asked who was there, and I didn't expect to get this kind of reply. Can I please come in? I'm here for the sleepover. Please, girls, let's play some more truth or dare. At that point, some of us were crying, and everyone was scared. How did he know we were here? That we were a bunch of girls at a sleepover? That we had just been playing truth or dare? How long had he been watching us? He must have been watching from some uncovered window before Elizabeth ever saw him on the street. We ran to my room and locked ourselves inside, and we waited there until morning, until my parents arrived. Then we practically flooded out of that bedroom, crying to my parents, telling them exactly what had happened last night. I don't know if they believed us, but still, this was the most horrifying moment of my life. Who was that man? How long did he watch us? And what did he have planned? Number 6. Strange Creature Sighting in Connecticut. Submitted by Sadie Washington 1331. This is a story told to me by my mother. She was around 15 years old at the time. Growing up in a small Connecticut town in the early 70s, there were a lot of woods and not a lot of things to do. So sleepovers were all the rage for those teenage girls. This particular night, my mom was dropped off at her friend's house. Her friend, Jan, lived in a very small farmhouse tucked back into the woods, away from the main road and far from any other neighbors. The house was white. It also had a porch that, instead of being on the front, it was attached to the back of the house, facing the backyard and towards the woods. Last but not least was the farmhouse door. The door that was in front that led inside the house had a gap under it about 9 inches wide. In the winter, they'd place a block into the gap to keep the cold out. This happened in the spring, so there was no block there keeping anything out. So it was a Saturday. My mom was just dropped off at Jan's house. Jan's parents had gone out for the evening, leaving the girls all alone. For the first part of the night, my mom and Jan did the normal sleepover things like gossip and doing each other's hair. Around 9:30 that night, they decided to watch a little TV in the living room. Suddenly, they heard the wood of the porch creaking, as if something or someone heavy was walking up onto it. Both girls stared at each other and listened as whatever it was began walking around the porch, very slowly. Maybe it's Tom? Jan asked. Tom was her older brother who was supposed to be out with his friends. He wasn't someone who was above playing jokes on people, especially his younger sibling. My mom rolled her eyes and stood up. She walked over to the back door. Slowly, she flipped on the light, and she went to pull back the curtain to get a look outside when they both heard whatever it was jump off of the porch. My mom peered into the darkness past where the light reached and saw a figure darting into the woods. She put the curtain back where it was and left the light on just in case. Then she went back to Jen. Whoever it was is gone now. It was probably Tom after all. Jan nodded unsuredly, and they went back to watching TV, still a little unnerved. They had just started to relax again when a shadow passed over the back door, and the porch began creaking once more. It was back. They listened as whatever it was walked slowly across the porch, heading towards the side of the house. They also heard what sounded like nails being dragged against the side of the home. It was a horrible sound. Both girls huddled there shaking, terrified. Whatever was out there made it to the end of the porch and was heading to the side door. For a few moments there was silence. My mom and Jan looked towards the side door. Maybe it was Tom, my mom thought, or rather hoped. Suddenly, a hand was thrust under the gap in the door, and the girls screamed. That was no human hand. It was covered in a reddish-brown fur, and the fingers were longer than any human fingers should have been, and had jagged black claws. Those claws scratched at the bottom of the door and the floor under it. There was a strange grunt from outside the door, and the hand was pulled back. They could once again hear the creature running away. Still screaming, Jan grabbed the door block and shoved it under the door. She grabbed a knife from the kitchen, and both girls sat huddled behind the couch until Jan's parents came home. They were greeted by two terrified teenagers. My mom then begged to be taken home. Of course, no one believed their stories. Tom was blamed. He was in trouble when he arrived home the next day. My mom maintains to this day that she knows what she saw and heard, and it wasn't Tom, and it definitely wasn't a person. Number 7. Creepy PS4 Stalker. Submitted by Game Genius 201. This happened a year ago. I live in Melbourne, Australia, and in a town where it's usually pretty safe. It was the long weekend and my friends, Adam and Jason, were coming to my house for a sleepover because my parents were out for the night. Now, my friends and I are the type of kids that just want to play games, and if we're not playing games, we're watching YouTube or Game of Thrones. My mom and dad left at 4:30, and Jason and Adam came around 5. I thought to myself, no parents and video games with friends all night. I was really excited. My mom left us some cash to order pizza. Pretty soon it was 7 p.m. and we were still playing video games when the house phone rang. I went to go pick it up, and I said, a little annoyed as I had to get up from my game, "Hello, who is this?" Now I know it sounds rude, but believe me, no one ever calls the house phone anymore, so if anyone called, it was really weird. On the other line, there was heavy breathing that seemed to get heavier with every breath, and whoever it was would not reply. They just kept breathing into the receiver. "What the?" I said, and I hung up immediately, a little freaked out. Adam saw my face and asked me what was wrong, and I muttered to him, "Some psycho was breathing into the phone." You should know that this freaked me out a little more than it should have, because I had watched a ton of movies recently, such as one about the Zodiac Killer, based on a true story, and I know the killer would sometimes ring the phone of the victim just to breathe heavily into the phone before killing his target, and I'm pretty easy to scare. After about 2 minutes calming down, my friends were laughing at me and saying, "Dude, you're so scared. It's only breathing. They were probably about to speak or something, or they couldn't even hear you." I thought about it for a moment, and I finally did calm down. Maybe they were right. But now I know better. I wish back then I would have just called the cops to be safe, or maybe just ran. But no, I stayed calm because I didn't know what was going to happen. No one did. It was 9 p.m., and we were going to pull an all-nighter, so while we were playing some Injustice, Call of Duty, and Rocket League off and on, we got bored, and by then I wasn't even thinking about the call. We decided to prank call a friend, some shops nearby, and maybe some family. A couple of hours later after that, we were bored of it, and as soon as we finished calling a friend named Adam, I got a text from an unknown number that simply said, "Hey, you wanna play?" Adam read the message with me and quietly said, "Who the heck is that?" We all saw it and thought maybe the family was trying to prank us back. We ignored the message and went back to playing some PS4. But I got a message on my PS4 via my PlayStation account. The username was just HGF, followed by a series of random numbers. But the message read the same as the text before. "Do you want to play or not?" I froze and looked at the profile. The account was strange, like a bot. There were no games, no friends, no trophies. At that point, everyone was getting creeped out. We didn't know who this was, how they got our number, how they even knew about us. We decided to leave my room and go to the living room to watch some Family Guy and South Park, when Jason got a call himself. He put it on speaker, then Jason said, "Hello?" Whoever was on the other line was breathing heavily and slowly. Before Jason gathered the courage to hang up, someone said in a very deep voice, "Hello, do you want to play?" Jason cursed, hanging his phone up so hard that he nearly threw it in the floor. I turned to Adam, and I see his phone. He was recording the conversation. We were all so creeped out by then that we decided to call the cops. But even they thought it was a prank call and would not send anyone over. I'd always thought they had to send someone over just in case. I guess I was wrong, or maybe someone was just bad at their job. Anyway, we had no other choice but to wait for my aunt to arrive home. At around midnight, my aunt still wasn't home when there was a small tap on the front door. I was actually relieved, thinking that my aunt finally got home. I opened the door, and no one was there. I thought to myself, maybe I'm hearing things, maybe I'm just paranoid. I was getting pretty tired by then. I said I should just probably go to sleep, and we all ended up going to bed. At around 4 in the morning, I heard something, the sound of someone dropping a heavy object. I got up and woke up Jason and Adam. We went to my dad's room, to his drawer, grabbing a couple of knives for protection, and we quietly went to the living room. In the darkness, we hear, "Why didn't you want to play? You could have just played with me." But no, it was coming from somewhere in the living room ahead of us. Then we heard heavy footsteps coming right at us. We ran back to my room, locking the doors behind us. As soon as we did, someone slammed against it. Adam was already on the phone with the police again, asking them for help, screaming at them to bring someone over. I yelled to the psycho just outside the door that we were calling the police and that we were armed. Then everything went quiet. We stayed in my room, trying to hear anything at all, but it was just silent. The cops finally did show up, around the same time that my aunt showed up. They found the front door's lock picked and carvings in the living room walls. It was nothing legible, but it was still horrifying. What did that psycho want with us? I wish it had ended there. Monday, school started up. Jason, Adam, and I were walking together. when Jason pulled us to the side out of the way of the other people and told us to look at this. He had a piece of paper that simply said, "Wanna play?" And he pointed at a guy at the back gate who was standing there, staring at us. Once he saw us looking, he gave us the creepiest smile that I've ever seen in my life. Right away, we told a teacher who was walking by. We told him the story from our sleepover that weekend. Luckily, the idiot was still there. The local police were called, and they actually caught the guy. I don't know if he had hurt anyone before that, but I know he was going to hurt us, somehow. I'm lucky that he never got the chance to. This whole experience was a living nightmare. Number 8. Sleepover Scare. Submitted by ZOEY Apple. It was February 2014 when this happened. My best friend Haley and I always hung out and spent the night together when we could. On this particular day, we had a sleepover. Now, Haley's dad would usually fall asleep in the second living room next to the front door, while me and Haley stayed up late in the other living room by the back door. Me and Haley always hide under blankets and get super paranoid, but it's kind of funny. We would watch ghost videos to get ourselves creeped out. But this night wasn't like the others. Haley and I were doing the usual and watching scary videos. Haley went to go make pizza while I stayed on her couch watching said videos. Haley's back door was see-through and had no blinds. It was right behind the couch, and Haley's kitchen was right beside her living room. Suddenly, I heard a tap on the window door, but it could have been anything. And plus, I could have just been paranoid like always. So when I didn't see anything outside, I just ignored it. Haley finished the pizza and sat down with me. Soon, I heard another knock, so I turned around, and again, there was nothing there. All I could see was pitch black outside. I did tell Haley this time, because I wanted to see if she heard the noises too, if they came back. Eventually, after the videos, we just sat there on our phones. And then, out of nowhere, we heard a double tap at the door. Both me and Haley looked at each other. We had very paranoid looks on our faces. We wanted to go check it out, to be sure of what it was. So we took a blanket and a flashlight, and we went into her backyard. Her backyard was surrounded by tall fences, but the exit to the backyard is by the side of the house. We looked around her trampoline, until we heard another sound, the sound of one of the fences creaking a little. And then we heard the sound of something breathing. We ran back inside, locking the door behind us. We told Haley's mom what happened, but she didn't believe us. Can't say I blame her. She knows what we're like. So we turned back to go back out, but we saw someone or something moving in front of the window next to the couch. And then we realized someone was in our backyard. Someone or something that was tall enough to reach up to the window. Then, a few seconds later, we heard the gate outside shut, so we went back out to double check and make sure no one was there. The gate was wide open. We tiptoed over towards it to see if we could see who it was. At that point, I felt like something was about to happen. I felt like I was living the worst nightmare. We did see somebody. A man or a woman hunched down, breathing a raspy breath, as if they were dying or something. They wheezed with every step. Then they took a right and went down the street. We didn't know who it was, or why they were in the backyard, why they were looking through that window. But something tells me they were up to no good. Number 9. A Special Cake. Submitted by LORRAINE D. This was one of the creepiest things that has ever happened to me. This isn't crapping yourself scary, but if you've had been in my place, it would be scary as hell. It was my 9th birthday, and I had all my friends over for a party and sleepover. I was a very babyish 9-year-old, so I had a My Little Pony birthday party. I had 5 other girls with me, and I was thrilled. We played tag and Marco Polo in the pool. Holly and Gianna wanted to play hide and seek, so we decided to play that for a good hour straight. After fun and games, my mom had called us in for some cake. See, this cake was vanilla with blue icing, and it said Happy Birthday Lorraine on it, written in purple, complete with all the main characters of the My Little Pony series. Point was, I loved this gorgeous cake, and me as well as all my friends could not wait to dig in. They sang happy birthday to me, and we had some cake. About an hour goes by and we're up in my room. We're playing the usual truth or dare, when suddenly, Gianna throws up everywhere, all over my carpet and room. Of course, all the other girls are screaming and grossed out, and Gianna's mom comes in and picks her up not long after. About a half hour after Gianna left, we're watching The Lion King in my living room since my room is being cleaned by my dad. And that's when Holly, who's laying next to me, gets up and runs to the bathroom, puking all the way. Holly had to be picked up as well. By then, all the other girls are worried, questioning why both of them got sick nearly at the same time. We talked about everything we had eaten. Everything that we'd had together were the pizza and cake. The rest of the evening was normal, and we all went to bed. It was now 1 a.m, and Kiki wakes me up. "Lorraine, Regina's not feeling good. She says her stomach's hurting." Regina, you guessed it, threw up everywhere a few minutes later. My mom considered getting Kiki and Fran picked up, worried that we were all getting sick, but she didn't want to bug Kiki's mom to come back and pick her up, because she had picked up her sister not even 4 hours ago. It's now 4 a.m. and I wake up, and now it's my turn. I threw up everywhere. It was painful, convulsion after another convulsion, over and over. By the time I was done, there was vomit all over the floor, and my stomach felt like it was imploding on itself. I thought I was dying. My mom then gets a call that Fran is violently ill, and my aunt is worried. My mom had had enough. That morning, she marched down to the bakery and asked to see a manager. Long story short, it turns out some creep had been fired and arrested about 2 days before my party. He had been the one to make my cake. You see, the guy had been putting rat poison in people's cakes. They found traces of it when a little boy that lived in our city had a cupcake from there, and he got severe food poisoning. His mother rushed the boy to urgent care and they found traces of the poison. Apparently, my cake was the last one the guy made before he was fired. And number 10, The Sleepover Surprise, submitted by SAMMIOFNIGHTMARES. Not too long ago, I had a sleepover with my friend named Maddie. When she arrived, it was around 8 o'clock or so. She had been to my house before, and she knew that weird things happened almost every night. But this night was different. At around 10 o'clock, we were watching YouTube videos, talking about school drama, until we began hearing noises. We tried to ignore them, but they were so persistent that it was hard to. And then there was something we couldn't ignore. A loud crash coming from inside my closet. The doorway had no door, but it was still covered by a blanket I hung up there, so I don't know what it was. We were too terrified at this point to want to try to find out. Then we hear whispering coming from the closet only a few minutes later. We couldn't really make out what they were saying, but if I had to guess, it sounded like Lucy. It scared us, and we quickly yanked our legs back onto the bed. The next day, we looked into my closet, and nothing seemed out of the ordinary, so we tried not to think about it for the rest of the day. Maddie ended up spending another night with me, and that night was the most terrifying night of my life. It was later that night. We were sitting on the floor playing with my LPS when we heard the sound of a doorknob turning. "Maybe we should tell your dad," Maddie whispered. "You see, everyone at the time was in bed, so no one should be turning any doors." I said that it's probably my brother, but I was more hopeful than certain. About 5 minutes later, I looked at Maddie, and she was absolutely horrified. She was looking behind me, and she was so scared that she couldn't speak. I turned around slowly, and nothing can explain the fear I had at that moment. My bedroom door opened, and I saw a little girl in the doorway. It didn't look like she had a normal face. "Do you see that?" I asked Maddie. My whole body was trembling. She didn't say a word. I slowly grabbed the blanket hanging from my bed and covered Maddie and I underneath it, like a couple of scared 5-year-olds. Then I prayed so hard that whatever that was would go away. We hid underneath the blanket for what felt like 3 hours, but it was only about 30 minutes. We agreed to look outside of the blanket, and the little girl was gone. We didn't know what to do. We got on the bed and didn't talk for a long while. We just laid there, listening and terrified. The next morning, we told my dad, and he looked throughout the whole house, even the attic, but found no trace of some little girl. I don't know what that thing was. It didn't look like a human in the face. It's hard to describe, but it was the most horrified I've ever been in my whole life. If you're looking for a moral to all of these stories, I've got one for you. Don't have a sleepover unless you have a death wish. Even when you're in a big group of friends having the time of your life, you can make stupid decisions. You can be ignorant of the dangers that are closing in, and you can attract some pretty terrifying creatures and ghouls to your door. So when the monsters come creeping up to your bedroom, let's just hope those thin blankets are enough to fool that beast into thinking you and your friends don't exist. Good night. Be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. And don't forget to send us your true scary stories at reddit.com/r/darknessprevails. Also, a huge thanks goes out to all my newest patrons. They are Denise Kinney and Alpha64. Thank you so much for doing what you can to support this channel. And as always, stay safe out there and stay creepy.